There are 3 words you should never say or avoid saying if you want to be a better communicator and enhance your relationships. Welcome to the What's Eating You podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, and I'm a psychologist, published author, and public speaker here to educate and validate. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to another episode on the What is Eating You podcast. I'm your resident host and clinical psychologist, Stephanie, and I'm very excited to be bringing you this episode today all the way from Melbourne. That is right. I have been down in sunny Melbourne. It's actually been sunny. I'm looking out the window right now and the weather has not been bad. So I'm very grateful that we've gotten some good sunshine while we've been down here. I'm down in Melbourne for Greek Easter, which was such a big eating feast as we went with our family and our friends and caught up with our parents because both me and my partner, our parents live in Melbourne. That's where we're both originally from. So yes, I'll do another episode on events and weight gain and fear of putting on weight and how your weight fluctuates because that's been a really interesting thing to think about. But this episode today actually was inspired by my dad. So this morning I drove my partner to the airport because he's going back to the Gold Coast and I'm actually going to Thailand. And when I say I drove him, what I mean is I sat in the car whilst he drove there and then my dad drove home. But I was there for the company, which was good. And my dad, if you haven't heard another episode with us, he is just such a big learner. He loves learning, he loves growing, he loves developing. He listens to my podcast every week and he is one of my biggest inspirations. He came to Australia not with very much, really built a life for himself and became the best version of him. So he's inspired us to do the same. And one thing he was asking me is, Steph, there are some particular things that really trigger me. And he wasn't even aware of triggers or what triggers mean, but he just said, there are things that really bother me and upset me, particularly language that other people use or in his close relationships. And he goes, I just thought it was me. I just thought that maybe I'm reactive and it's something I need to work on, which yes, is true. We all need to work on our reactivity. But there are particular words which I don't use. I have tried not to use and I'm always trying to modify them. And if you're listening to this, I want you to think about 1, what words or situations trigger me? And number 2, what words or situations do I find myself in that trigger others? Now, I know this can be a little bit difficult to think about and a little bit challenging to consider because you have to step out of your own little bubble and say, okay, if I've ever upset another person, what was it that I've done that's triggered them? So for me, what triggers my partner is when I use the language always and never, which I don't do anymore. And this is feedback I've gotten in previous relationships as well. So if you were getting the same feedback and the same comments from people, for example, you're defensive, you upset me when you say this, then maybe you need to consider that there is a kernel of truth in what the other person is saying, right? Now, this podcast isn't just an active, passive podcast. It is one where I really want you to reflect and think about what I'm saying because this is how you grow as a person. You step out of your emotion and you actually consider how other people see you and you consider things that you do and you say that can make you a better person because that's how you grow and that's how you develop. So for me, I noticed I use all or nothing language. And this is the first word or type of expression that I encourage you to reflect on and potentially modify. So all or nothing words sounds like this. You never take care of me. You always do this. You never do the gardening. You always put yourself first. So it sounds like that. And it's language that's it's finite. It's final, right? Finite, final. It's always, never, perfection, imperfect, those types of all or nothing language. And one thing I noticed was I do say that. And I think I add it for a dramatic effect when I know it's not logical and I know it's not true. But when I'm feeling very hurt and overwhelmed, obviously our brain shuts down. We know this from my course, Unchain Your Brain. We know this from my other podcasts. When you're in fight or flight, your logical brain shuts down. So you can't really think at the moment, well, that's not really accurate that he never cares about me because he does do things that show he cares and supports me. But in that moment, you're just angry and you want to get things off your chest. That's why it's so important if you are having a bit of a communication crisis or an argument with someone or a disagreement, you have to do it from a place where you are grounded and calm. And this is the biggest mistake people make. They disagree and they argue when they're heightened, and this when it can turn into a fight and something quite extreme. So the first thing is obviously regulate yourself, but don't use the words always and never. Examples can be if you are annoyed at your partner that they didn't message you when they were out, you never message me when you're out, or you never do the things I ask you to do. Instead of saying that, what I want you to do is focus on how you're feeling and say, I feel hurt and upset that you didn't message me when you were out. And just isolate it to that one moment. Try not to make it a huge generalized statement, because on the receiving end, it really makes the person feel undervalued. It makes them feel that all the hard work they put into the relationship, all the friendship just gets unnoticed. And it's not true. It's not a true statement. If we were to put that thought on trial, which is something we do in all my mindset courses, which means we challenge it. We say, okay, where's the evidence that this person has never done anything for you? And then where's the evidence that they have done things for you? We actually see that the thinking is faulty. Second word. The second thing that I try so hard not to use in counseling, which I've been trained not to use, is the word why. Now, the word why is just a normal word. It doesn't have anything going for it, but it is loaded with judgment, and it is loaded often with a tone. Why would you do that? Why would you say that? Why aren't the dishes done? It's usually the context of why. You're not really saying, I wonder why birds are green. I wonder why carrots grow out of the ground. These are really bad examples, but whenever you use the word why in communication, it's never in a helpful, positive, reflective capacity. So I want you to reflect on how you use the word why. The reason it's really ineffective is because, one, it's loaded with judgment. Why would you do this? Why would you do that? It's loaded with judgment. And many people will be saying, oh, but you know what? I just want to know why. That's fine. But I promise you, if you ask it in a different way, you're going to be met with a different response, because not only is why loaded with sort of judgment and accusation, it also puts the other person on the defensive. They think they have to justify themselves because they feel like they're being told off for something. For example, why didn't you do the dishes? They have to feel like, oh, I have to tell an excuse, or, oh, I didn't have time. It's like they're a child and they've done something wrong. What I want you to do is replace why with, can I ask? Or, how come? Hey, how come you didn't get a chance to do the dishes? Versus, why aren't the dishes done? Notice the difference? This will have instrumental differences on your communication and your relationships. And I can tell you firsthand how modifying your language, modifying your tone will really improve your communication in any dynamic, in your work settings, in your friendship settings, and in your relationship settings, and also in communication with your family. The third and final thing is using you statements. You upset me. You did this. You did that. What you want to do in communication is avoid you statements, because again, they're very blaming and they're just going to put that person in the offensive or the defensive, and it's not going to make for a productive discussion. Instead, I want you to focus on I statements, right? So I had a little tiff. I think I did a podcast episode last week. I was annoyed that my partner didn't plan anything for the weekend, and I was really upset and I yelled. And this is something that sets him off, is when I yell, because when you're Greek, you just have a loud voice. And, growing up, there was a little bit of shouting in my household, nothing extreme. But one thing I've really learnt with him is yelling does not work. It triggers him and he shuts down. He doesn't respond to it, which is probably the best thing he could do, because what it does is it makes me think, okay, I'm not going to get anywhere with this. I need to be calm. I need to communicate more effectively to get, what I need out of the situation. So when you notice you're heightened and yelling, I'm just going to move away from you statements for a sec. take a deep breath, go for a walk, and when you're calm, then you're going to communicate. And instead of saying, you always do this, you never do this, you upset me, I took a deep breath and I said, I feel disappointed. So what I want you to do is move away from your you statements, because they're blaming, they're accusatory, they're just loaded with unhelpful emotion, and just turn it into a you and say, I feel upset, I feel disappointed, I feel hurt. And then what we can do is explore that, and it gives us more of an effective space to discuss what's going on. Because if it's you, then it's all blaming one person. So in summary, remember, communication doesn't come down just to what you say. It really comes down to how you say it. It comes down to the timing, and it comes down to regulating your nervous system. So remember, 1, communicate when you are calm and your nervous system is regulated. So if you notice you're heightened, if you notice you're aggravated, take a deep breath, go for a walk, gather your thoughts, write your notes in your phone, so when you come back to the conversation, you're ready. 2, try not to use never and always statements, because all or nothing thinking just project blame and aren't effective. And 3, move away from why statements. Try to say, how come? Or can I ask this? And the final thing is, try not to use you statements. Instead, focus on I feel statements. If you enjoyed this episode, please scroll down, leave a little rating, because I really appreciate your ratings and I want to hit 100 ratings by the end of the year. I'm so thankful you're here, and I wish you the most beautiful week ahead. I'll be sending you my live updates from Thailand, so stay tuned for that. And again, thank you so much. I'm very grateful for you. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I am truly grateful for you being here. If you got something out of today's show, please take a moment to leave a rating or review. To access more resources or support, check out the show notes below. See you next time.